We have to pour into ourselves at this time. Just waking up with a sense of precariousness and doom and questioning about the precipice that we're on.
The revolution for Black women has always been about moving away from trying to love others and loving ourselves, starting there, learning to love ourselves deeply.
We need community care, especially in times like this. Self-care, it may do it for a day. It is not going to do it for the marathon. So we really need to focus on community care. And part of the community care model is to collaborate.
It's become so apparent to me that my longevity in this work depends on my well-being. And I don't think I understood that. I don't think I was thinking about it. I think I was just rolling through and pretending like I was taking care of myself when really I was just gaping from reality.
Hello and welcome. I'm Reverend Dr. Aleese Moore-Orby, and this is Black Women Talking Back Social Justice Podcast. Black Women Talking Back is a new global platform for women passionate and committed to social justice to share their stories of passion, pain, hope, and equally important, strategies for change. In today's political climate, which seems to foster the resurgence of blatant racism and systemic inequities faced by the Black communities, sisters, we need tools, we need resources and strategies designed to foster self-love and personal well-being while we are yet promoting the well-being of our communities. Black Women Talking Back podcast is that opportunity and that resource for us to learn how to take better care of ourselves, our communities, and talk back to the MAGA machine. I invite you to join the movement and to join the podcast. Black Women Talking Back is for you. So, without further ado, our magnificent guest, we have some beautiful, brilliant, benevolent women on the podcast today. And I'm sure that you will be inspired by them, you will be educated by them, and you will be glad that you spent your time here on the podcast. So I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Hutchinson. Dr. Hutchinson is an author, educator, and a playwright, and the founder of Black Skeptics Group and Black Skeptics Los Angeles. Our next guest is Dr. McKinney. Dr. McKinney is the CEO of the National Black Women's Justice Institute. Our next guest is Raina Granberry. Raina is the maternal health equity strategist and the director of maternal health and reproductive health at California Black Women's Health Project. These Black women who are doing the work for Black women in Black communities 24/7 are here with us today to share wisdom, experience, and inspiration with you. And we'll get started. So I know that I know some of us are pressed for time, and so I'm going to mix things up a little bit. If you give me some grace to do just that, to move around, I want to start us off with the first question, which is if you all could share with the audience what brought you to this work, what drew you to this work, maybe what you saw or what you didn't see that brought you to this work, and why you stay in this work. And you're free to respond anytime. This is organic, so there's no hierarchy or process here. You can be free to talk anytime you get ready.
Well, I can start, and I want to give a shout out of appreciation and gratitude to my fellow panelists, as well as to you, Dr. Aleese. Really great to be here this afternoon. In addition to being the founder of the Black Skeptics Los Angeles organization, I'm also the founder of the Women's Leadership Project. And we work hand in hand to really uplift and amplify Black girls, girls of color, Black women, and LGBTQIA plus and gender expansive communities. And what compelled me to become involved in this work as an educator, as a writer, as a sexual and domestic and intimate partner violence survivor was the fact that there is very little culturally responsive and culturally specific prevention education curricula within LAUSD schools in particular, and in our K through 12 school system in general. And when I was coming up in the 1980s and being victimized by sexual harassment, sexual violence, and other forms of gender-based violence and abuse, there was no visibility for this work. The voices of Black girls who were survivors of this kind of anti-Black misogyny, systematized misogynoir, were silenced. Our experiences were erased. In many instances, we did not have Black women advocates at our schools. I was just thinking about this the other day, that I only had one Black woman teacher throughout the entire time when I was in K through 5, and one when I was in middle school. And I didn't have a single Black teacher in high school to really, a Black female, excuse me, teacher in high school that was available to step up and to mentor and to advocate and to make visible the struggles, the trials, and the erasure that we were experiencing. And this issue of intersectionality that we really embed in our practice was nowhere to be found. So coming full circle in the 21st century, when I was really steeped in the K through 12 system in LAUSD, coming into the policy perspective as a professional within the LAUSD school board. I was a deputy for one of the school board members who was a Black feminist activist, an outlier in the school board, and really thinking about my experiences in LAUSD schools, the trauma that I had to navigate almost single-handedly, alone, and wanting to really implement programming that was going to be specific to the experiences of Black girls with sexual abuse and trauma, but also obviously uplifting their strengths and their resilience and the social histories, the organizing, the leadership that inform all of the legacies of just activism that Black women bring to the classrooms and to our school communities in general. And I wanted the work to be intersectional with regard to the experiences of queer and gender expansive Black girls, because we're not seeing that type of programming, even here and now in 2025 in California, that has some of the most quote unquote liberal, inclusive, and progressive policies for queer and gender expansive youth. We do not see this type of institutionalized care and curriculum and outreach for our Black queer youth.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sakivu. I grew up in Los Angeles, 70s and 80s, middle school, high school. And as a survivor of several sexual assaults, there was no one talked about it within the community. I mean, our neighborhood, no one talked about it at school. There was no language for me to explain what happened to me. And so I just say I was one of those students, and so I'm so grateful to your commitment and to your work in the city of Los Angeles, that you are creating a safer place for young girls in Los Angeles. Thank you. So what drew you to this work, and why do you stay?
I can go next. So great to be here. Thank you so much again for the invitation, and so excited to be in community again with you, Dr. Aleese, and to meet these incredible panelists. Already I'm excited and got to figure out how we connect afterwards, because they're so in our work. I'm Dr. Sydney McKinney, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Black Women's Justice Institute. And this is such an interesting question, because I am been feeling more and more that I have always been called to do the work that we do at the National Black Women's Justice Institute. The organization is a Black women-led, research-driven nonprofit working to end the systemic criminalization of Black women and girls. And I have always been passionate and had a deep love for research. When I was young, though, I thought I was going to be a biomedical researcher. I had some summer programs where I was studying herpes and thought, I'm going to be a virologist and change the world in that way. I got to college and took a bio class. Didn't go the way I had hoped. But at the same time, I became introduced to American studies, where I had finally a space where I had language to really explain the feelings and challenges I was having as a Black woman and girl in the world, struggling with feeling unseen, unheard, frustrated by the harms against my community. And from there, moved into a space where I really wanted to dedicate my life to being able to do research that really supports Black women and girls who are impacted by the criminal legal system. For a long time, I was in the criminal justice reform research space and feeling very frustrated because no one was talking about Black women and girls. And everyone was kind of talking about racial justice without talking about racial justice. And it was just incredibly frustrating to come to this work from a place of not just an academic interest, but also from a very personal, deep desire to want to change things as a person who has incarcerated loved ones and also has lost people to family members to police violence. I came to this work from a place of understanding very deeply the harms that the criminal legal system inflicts on Black individuals, families, and communities, and wanting to change that. However, found myself in a world where folks were just kind of doing the day-to-day, the status quo. I came to the work wanting to put myself out of business, right? We shouldn't have folks doing this kind of work. Everyone else around me was just what do we do to just kind of get a new grant in and do a new project? So when I found the National Black Women's Justice Institute, or rather when it found me, I was like, this is my dream job. I never knew that this organization could exist. It was focused on Black women and girls who are impacted by the criminal legal system, committed to research and evaluation, and wanting to do so in a way where directly impacted Black women and girls' voices, leadership, and expertise were front and center. And so that is what brought me to this work. And it is what keeps me here. It's why I'm still here. There is such an absence in our field around criminal justice reform of work being led by Black women and work that is rooted in research and participatory research. And the organization is really carving out that space. And I think as a trailblazer in the field, I feel so proud to be able to push others who are talking about racial justice and criminal and gender justice to really be even more, actually to be intentional and not just use the buzzwords, but to actually see how you can do it well in a way that really supports the dignity and humanity of Black women and girls.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Dr. Sidney. I know, well, the work is just so important. When I think about the pipeline to prison, when I think about the young girls who are going to juvenile hall for quote unquote acting out in class, who are getting a record for nothing, for normal behavior, and having that information to follow them for a lifetime, graduating high school with that criminal record already in existence for them. Black girls already have a hard time trying to get into college, already have a hard time trying to get a job, and now they've got this criminal record as a child. And just the compounded barriers that then follow her throughout life, the inability to get further education, to get a job, how that then speaks to her ability to feed herself, to have good health, have stable mental health, to have stable relationships, all the things, that just continue to trickle and lead to early disease and early death. Is just incredible. That starts in elementary school very often, young Black girls getting a case as early as elementary school. And so I so appreciate the work that your organization does, because I don't think it would be done without it. And I can't stay here. I'll stay here.
I was also just going to say that it's directly connected to the work that Dr. Hutchinson is leading, right? Because so many of the women and girls who are in our prisons and jails are survivors. And so many Black women and girls are survivors, don't have access to services because they are not believed, right? And so the work that we are all doing is so connected, and trauma is at the root of people's incarceration, and that's what NBWJI is working to change.
Yes, yes. And then that trauma leads us right next to our next speaker, Raina, who's gonna share a little bit from her public health perspective.
Yes, it leads a lot into my work, but also my personal story and why I'm here. As I know the question is, what led me here? And when I was in school, my plan was to be a journalist, specifically sports journalism. But I also kind of wanted to do like global journalism as well. Um, but as I went along my journey and as a 29-year-old woman. I found myself pregnant, not in the place that I wanted to be in, had a boyfriend, but didn't have the money I wanted. So went to get my Medi-Cal, thank God for Medi-Cal. And I really had a terrible experience as a young, quote unquote, poor. I didn't have the money, I couldn't really take care of myself. I was really dependent on government assistance, even though I had family and a lot of support. And I felt treated that way throughout the system and, turned in and out when I knew I had a lot of problems with my pregnancy. And that pregnancy ended up resulting in a stillbirth, in which, that morning I had called my doctor and told them, it just feels like something isn't right. They told me, you're a young mother. I mean, this is your first time. You're probably just scared and you're probably just anxious, but I went into premature labor hours later. And so you talk about trauma, and trauma is how I got into, beginning in birth work before expanding into larger health equity in LA County Department of Public Health. I started in birth work trying to make sure that what I experienced wouldn't ripple throughout our community. And what I found out when I started sharing my story, that it had been rippling through our community forever. And everybody started telling me about their traumatic birth experience, about their miscarriage, about how they've been treated. And so, just really wanted to make an impact. I worked on a local level in nonprofits, and then said, like, nonprofits are doing such beautiful work, and we're right here with the community hand in hand. But I decided that I wanted to go inside the system that was perpetuating the harms, and see what impact I could make there. And quickly found that, that is different. You fight another beast when you're inside of a system fighting for your people, but just fighting for yourself. Experiencing the same racism inside the public health system as an employee, as people who interact and interface with it experience. And so that, really led me to coming to the California Black Women's Health Project, where I knew that I could make a impact. I could continue to do policy as the org does policy. I still could continue to do programming and curriculum development to really impact, not just maternal health, but women's health overall. And we really continue to build our maternal reproductive health program as a part of our larger program at California Black Women's Health Project. And so there is a lot of intersections, as Dr. Sydney mentioned, as Akibu mentioned. We do work directly with system impacted girls, and I see Deborah is joined us and Natalie joined us, and they work directly with our girls in the juvenile halls, in the transitional homes. A lot of our girls have are dealing with being unhoused. So we when you're dealing in maternal and reproductive health and public health, um, in public health in a comprehensive way, you are going to touch all the intersections. We can't have health equity without mental health, without financial health, without emotional health, and without justice. So I'm really happy to be here and to continue to talk about the work of the California Black Women's Health Project.
Thank you so much, Raina. Thank you. And so grateful for, again, the work that Black women's, So maybe I made a mistake when I invited two presenters from Los Angeles who's doing work that really impacts or is connected to my own history. And so, yeah, so when, as Dr. Hutchinson began to speak all my stuff, I just started to think about, yes, there was no one there for me. And as you began to talk about maternal health in, as a result of being raped as a teenager, I was also impregnated, and my mother took me to have an abortion. No one talked to me about that. No one talked to me about the rape. No one talked to me. I was 14. No one talked to me about the pregnancy, and no one talked to me about the abortion. And so I'm so grateful that your organization is there doing work with young Black girls. And so just thank you. Thank you. This is already healing for me. This conversation is already healing for me. So thank you all. So I know this may be a tough question, but you guys had it in advance. So hopefully there's a little prep there. Just so all the rest of our listeners can know, again, there's so much work going on. Could you name like maybe one of the greatest things that your organization has done for Black women in the past? And one of the greatest things that you're doing right now that is impacting the lives of Black women? So what's your shout outs? What's the thing that, you know, the elevator speech? What's the thing you always talk about when you have opportunity that your organization has done in the past and are doing right now, is doing right now?
I'm happy to start off. I did want to mention, because you talked about your abortion, we have recently started collecting Black women's abortion stories. It's something that we want to take out of the taboo. It's something we want to talk about. Reproductive health is health, and it's important that we talk about it. And so I just wanted to thank you for sharing that and sharing your story before talking about the org. But I want to share that, you know, we are a 30-year-old organization. And we are committed to the 1.2 million women and girls across the state. And so I think what I'm really proud about is that we've really dug into all of our communities and our counties. I mean, we want to get a little deeper in the Central Valley, but we do have some folks in Modesto because we really don't want to forget about our Black women anywhere. A lot of times in programs, you can only get funding or whatever if you focus on these counties where there's a large concentration of Black women and girls. But we are really committed into getting into all the cracks. We were just in Santa Barbara. So I think I'm really proud of the fact that our commitment runs deep into finding our folks where they are. And then one of our really trademark models. I mean, we do advocacy, education, policy, and outreach, but one of our flagship models is to train. So we train folks across the state so that people have resources right there in their community. You don't have to call California Black Women's Health Project. You can call your neighbor or somebody within your community who has been trained on mental health, who's been trained on maternal health, who's been trained on abortion support and care, who's been trained on, we have Carlene here who really works with our elders and our aging population, who gets left out of a lot of these health conversations. And so I think that is probably one thing that I can point to, even though I could talk all day about the work we do, is that our model is to create leaders and to do like Dr. Cindy said, we're trying to work ourselves out of jobs. People shouldn't have to come to Inglewood looking for the California Black Women's Health. We need a cadre of educated people who can advocate across the state.
Yes, thank you, Raina.
Yeah, and I'll go next. A couple of things. Back during the real horrendous period of the pandemic, right when it was declared, our youth, because we're a youth-led organization, the Women's Leadership Project is, and we had ninth and 10th graders that spearheaded a survey where they were posing the question about care that sexual harassment and sexual violence victims who were female identifying, African American, and Latinx were or were not receiving. So the majority of African American girls that responded to that survey, based in South LA, were indicating that they had not received any care. They were victims, they were survivors of horrendous, systematized sexual harassment and sexual violence, had not seen counselors or therapists, had not had any kind of platform or forum or validation of their experience, had not been able to process the trauma that they were undergoing. And so, as a result of those assessments and those responses, we partnered with Open Paths Counseling, which is based in your neck of the woods, Raina, in Inglewood, and they're headed by a Black woman. And my child, who identifies as non-binary, had a very culturally responsive therapist of color who was queer identified and really resonated with that individual. And so I thought, what about developing a pilot that would provide culturally responsive and culturally affirming care for Black girls who were survivors of sexual violence and domestic and intimate partner violence, as well as our Black queer youth, ages 14 to 24. So we initiated that pilot in 2021. It is still going strong. It has transitioned to allowing care, free individual therapy and collective therapy if folks are interested, under the umbrella of this pilot. And so that's something that we're really proud of, because another key factor here is that a lot of our youth that are queer identifying were also identifying religious trauma that they were experiencing. And Black Skeptics is the only African descent, secular humanist, progressive to radical organization in the United States that provides programming for youth across the spectrum. Doesn't matter whether or not they're spiritual, they're faith-based, or they're secular humanist, atheist, agnostic. We want to provide programming for these young people, paid internships for these young people, and scholarships. We provide scholarships for secular youth of color who come from undocumented backgrounds, queer backgrounds, unhoused backgrounds, system-involved backgrounds, and may have disabilities. So that's another distinguishing initiative that we implemented. And the final thing I want to say is that as a result of the pandemic, we spearheaded the Standing for Black Girls wellness initiative that I mentioned, in addition to doing annual rallies, actually two, that amplify Black girls and Black women and queer folks that have been victimized by rape culture and sexual violence and sex trafficking. We're out in the streets in South LA. And we also do an annual one that amplifies the disproportionate numbers of Black women and girls that have gone missing and been murdered. We know those stats are horrendous, that we represent over 30% of those who have been missing and or abducted here in the United States. And yet we constantly see white supremacist and white woman focused and privileging media that erases our lived experiences, our trauma, and these skyrocketing rates of abduction.
Thank you, Dr. Hutchinson. Dr. McKinney.
Yes. The National Black Women's Justice Institute is 10 years old this year, which is very exciting. My institutional memory goes back to the end of 2019, which feels like yesterday and so long ago, all at the same time. So I feel like it's kind of hard to answer the question, like the stuff we used to do and where, like, things we're excited about from the past and what we're excited about now, because it all just feels like the same moment to me. The things, though, that I am so proud of is the research and the fact sheets that we've been able to put out over the last 6 years since I've been with the organization. For a while, and I'm not sure if this is still the case, we put out a fact sheet about Black girls and their mental health. And if you typed into Google Black girls and mental health, it was the top response that you would get, which is really, really exciting. We've also done some fact sheets around Black women and girls and their experiences of gender-based violence and how they construct pathways into the criminal legal system that I am so proud of, and conversations that we've also been able to continue to move around that same topic of criminalized Black survivors. And to your point, so many Black women and girls are survivors of sexual exploitation, abuse, and assault. And when we think about who is a survivor, it's not us, right? And being able to put the data to the reality and help people see, right? When you're thinking about survivors of sex trafficking in this country, you should be thinking about a Black woman and girl. And even the Bureau of Justice Statistics has data that shows that 40% of sex trafficking victims were Black. It's very old data. They haven't updated it, but that's not the image that is conjured up, right? When you think about sex trafficking survivors in this country. So I'm so proud of the research that we have been able to do, the data we've been able to lift up, and the ways in which we've been able to use that to fuel conversations that are so relevant to all of the work that each of us is talking about. What I'm proud of in this moment is the ways in which we've been able to translate our research into programming and action. So most recently, last fall, we released our CARES mental health school assessment. CARE stands for Creating Affirming, Responsive, and Equitable Schools. And we created this assessment tool in collaboration with Black girls so that schools could use an organizational assessment to determine, are the mental health services and practices that they have in place meeting the needs of Black girls as Black girls define and understand them? We piloted it this past year in 2024, and the schools that joined on were so happy with its impact, right? Like, they had tried other tools before, but nothing really helped them understand what Black girls were experiencing. Nothing helped them create action plans that were really guided by what Black girls say they want and need and expect from their schools. None of them were helping them really think about using data to better understand the harms or the disparate treatment of Black girls in school. So I feel very proud of that, and I am excited to expand that into other schools that are interested and committed to creating mental health systems of care that support Black girls. We also have launched our Sisters in Solidarity Reentry Network, which is a community of support and learning for formerly incarcerated Black women who are leading reentry services and advocacy for gender responsive reentry services in this country. As we all know, Black women are at the forefront, right, of every movement, and formerly incarcerated Black women are the ones who are driving change around reentry services for women and girls. This, for me, was born out of one of the first projects I did when I got to the National Black Women's Justice Institute, hearing women say, I want community, I want to be around other folks doing this work to strategize, commiserate, celebrate. And in the last year, we have been able to fund 10 Black women who are leading this work with small grants, $10,000. But for small organizations, we know $10,000 goes a long way. And in addition to those grants, we have been providing technical assistance, helping them think about programming, data, helping them collect data, like whatever it is that they need to move their work forward, we have been there to support them. And most recently, we concluded our first cohort, and all of them said, like, this is a sisterhood. This is everything I wanted and more. I used to see, so-and-so at conferences and we didn't talk. Now I see her, we run up to each other and hug, right? And so the community that we've been able to facilitate is something I'm so proud of, because these are the women who are doing the transformative work in this field. who do not get the attention, the visibility, and we're there supporting them every step of the way. And really, because of our commitment to highlighting, celebrating, and uplifting community-led innovation, that's what we're doing here. And we have also helped got additional funding as a result of being in this network, because we brought funders in and we're like, we want to showcase you all to funders. And funders were like, okay, right? And so this is what we've been able to create and support, because these are the folks who are doing the work. So that's what I'm really excited about now, is growing that. We have our next cohort joining this year of 5 new organizations. If anyone knows of any organizations that are led by formerly incarcerated Black women who are in the early stages doing reentry work, please send them to me. We are always looking to grow this of support and learning.
Thank you, Sydney. Thank you. And for that fabulous work that you're doing across the nation, especially, I want to say, especially around data collection, because that's one of our weaknesses for all the reasons we know. And to have an organization that's actually helping us get good data that can help us move policy and program is just great work. So thank you so much for that. So this podcast is not brought to you by federal funds or any other funds. So let's talk a little bit about our current environment. Our president and his crew, his $1 billion crew, and I want to say the Republican Party, but I would be lying. I have to say both the Republican and the Democratic Party, who are not looking out for Black women at all, and any other oppressed group, but especially Black women. I just wanted us to talk a little bit about, this not a new environment, because it's not a new environment. It's really not. It's nothing new is happening. I think the players have come out from behind the curtains now, and so now we actually know who the real players are. I think people are no longer being passive aggressive with language anymore. They're just saying exactly what they mean, and so I don't think anything new is happening. I think it's just out front, like it's in a way it's never been before, even though some of us are still in denial about what's going on. But nevertheless, there are shifts and impact. There's going to be impact like we've never seen before. And there's going to be shifts, I think, like we've never, at least this generation, these 2-3 generations of Black women have ever seen before. So my question would be, in this MAGA political era, what are the very specific barriers or challenges that your organization is facing to continue to do this great work that you all are doing for Black women and Black community?
Well, our organization is very small. Our organizations, Black Skeptics is a 501c3, and the Women's Leadership Project is an initiative that's been going for 2 decades now. And so we've always struggled with capacity, with fundraising, with visibility, with recognition, with validation in school communities that we're doing programming in. I mean, all of the amazing panelists have talked about the erasure of the lived experiences and the social capital, the cultural knowledge, and the social history of Black women and girls. And that's magnified at the K through 12 level because there is no real intersectional recognition of the specific struggles that Black girls experience with, again, misogynoir and patriarchy and colorism and classism and hypersegregation and criminalization and surveillance. So you have this quagmire that Black girls have to navigate on the daily, on the hourly, with no advocates, with no infrastructure, with, unfortunately, because we've gotten this before, Black administrators and in some instances, Black faculty that don't have critical consciousness about how we need to uplift Black womanist and Black feminist initiatives and curricular approaches when it comes to the specific mental health dynamics that Black girls are experiencing. Okay. So that has always existed, but of course it's been exacerbated by this hyper conservative, fascistic, authoritarian, Christian white nationalist context, where we see grants being pulled, where we see folks being tasked with scrubbing websites, where we see networks being decimated. And it's just gotten to the point where a lot of us are experiencing that emotional trauma with regard to trying to navigate where we go next. How are we going to survive this firestorm? So what we've been trying to do is remain hyper focused on the work, on the voices of our youth, and strengthening and reinforcing them. For example, we just did a professional development training at a predominantly Black and brown school with predominantly Black faculty administrators. I'm not going to shout out the specific school, where our youth were being questioned because they were actually spearheading the professional development training with our guidance. And these were queer and gender expansive youth. This was a creating safe spaces for queer and gender expansive youth training, one of the few that's done from the perspective of Black youth, principally, and BIPOC youth. And I know, Dr. Aleese, you have a problem with that term, but it's germane with regard to this particular school community's population. So there's already tension there because it's coming from the perspective of marginalized Black queer youth that do not have safe spaces in this context and are even under a greater microscope given the national context that we're delineating here. And unfortunately, our youth are experiencing micro and in some instances macroaggressions from Black folks. Okay. So it's like we have this constellation of traumas that we're dealing with, not just coming from the white fascistic power structure, but coming from our internalized homophobia, heteronormativity, heterosexism, and in a nutshell, anti-Blackness.
Yes. I dare you, Dr. Sakuvo, name that. But it is so real how our own internalization of
we want to be crystal clear. I just want to put a pin in that last point about how this is anti-Black, because some people are like, well, if it's coming from Black people, how can it be anti-Black? It's anti-Black because queer, gender expansive, African descent folks are our people, are our community, our families, our lifeblood, our identities, period.
Yes. And the division that other folk have taught us to make within our communities is absolutely anti-Blackness. Thank you. Thank you for naming that. Thank you. Who'd like to go next?
I was going to say, as my grandmother would say, she made that plain. Did she not?
She made it plain.
Made it plain. Made it plain. Well, I'll give two specific examples, but I will say that in maternal and reproductive health, we're always operating in a hostile environment because, the birth of gynecology came from violence against Black girls. They were not women. I like to mention Betsy, Lucy, and Anarcha, the women who were girls who were operating on multiple times with no anesthesia until one of them actually was disfigured from all the experiments done. They were all girls. They were all teenage girls, and so that legacy of violence is permeates no matter what who we have running the country. However, it does get exacerbated, like Sakupa mentioned, and two of those examples is we have already seen that California has tried to make a commitment to maternal and reproductive justice. They've really sort of held the line. And because we never really go after a lot of federal funding, because we know how that can that can kind of backfire on you in some cases, especially when you work in reproductive health. But even California, when you're kind of supported by your state, we still had a public health program in one of our state counties be sued by Trump's judges, by the judges he appointed. The program was sued, and we can no longer run the program for specifically for Black and Pacific Islander women and birthing folks. And the reason why we were doing that, of course, was because of the disparity, right? So even when we show the data that shows that the disparity is like, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. We have people who will come after us with names like Americans for Civil Rights. These are the types of names they have, and they sue us for reverse discrimination, even when the state has our back. So that is a challenge for us because, we are the California Black Women's Health Project, and we ain't taking the Black out of our name. And so that creates a challenge for us as we move forward. And every time we come forward, people are saying, well, are these programs specifically for Black women and girls? And the answer is always going to be yes. And then we have to explain and defend and try not to be sued. So, that, and we are a partner in that Abundant Birth Project. That was sued, and that had to rearrange the way it does outreach for Black folks because we are not allowed to be Black. A judge has said that we can't be Black and get services specific to ourselves, although so many specific services exist in other communities. So that is one very specific example. And our CEO, Sonia Adam, just joined, so I'm happy to see her. And wish she heard that first part because we go hard for the Black and it ain't changing. And then the second example is that I think we talked about the stigma of abortion earlier, and I think that what people didn't understand and didn't want to fight for when it was time to preserve the rights to abortion and other reproductive health services, I don't think they understand what that actually does for people who want to give birth as well. So what we've seen is that these abortion bans that are being held up are affecting maternal health services, not just reproductive health services. And we are seeing that all those disparities are increasing. As we were working and decreasing them, the disparities are now increasing again because the attacks on reproductive justice do have a ripple effect into maternal health. And if a person can't get service, can't get their abortion, and can't get any other type of reproductive health services that they need, and then end up pregnant, imagine what type of trauma that happens to a person. So now we have mental health we have other services for a person who would have been just fine and healthy continuing on their reproductive path. And so yeah, so those are two very specific examples that I can mention. And yes, we can't feel safe being in California because there are judges there in the Supreme Court who can still sue your programs.
Thank you, Raina. Dr. Sakuvu has to leave, and if she can give us 2 minutes, I just want her to answer one question that we're not quite ready for, but I want to get her before she leaves. What should we be keeping our eye on? What word of advice, wisdom do you have for our listeners?
I think that we have to pour into ourselves at this time. As I mentioned before, I've just experienced a lot of trauma, just waking up with a sense of precariousness and doom and questioning about the precipice that we're on. But I'm always uplifted and affirmed by the work that our youth are spearheading and the collaborations that they're initiating and the history that they're drawing on. So I would say that if we could continue to do multi-generational work and really be attuned to the lived experiences and the authentic struggles that our young people are navigating and articulating, that is going to be a balm for this.
Thank you, Dr. Sakuvu. Thank you very much. And thank you for centering, which is one of the reasons I really wanted to have you here. It's centering our young people. I think you and your organization are one of the greatest advocates and activists for young people in this country. So thank you. Thank you for being you. And thank you for the work that you do.
And thank you. I appreciate everyone.
Absolutely. So Sydney, let me just double check. Raina, are we good with you? Are you finished with your barriers? Or you have more? Because we could talk about reproductive
No,
reproductive justice and maternal health all day.
I will add one last thing, if that's all right with you and Dr.
Sure.
Sydney. Um, Training. And so I think when people, I also saw on the internet yesterday, why were we worried about DEI? DEI is not black, like it's not a black folk problem. Like the people who will suffer are like veterans as if they ain't black veterans, and white people, like those are the folks, right? But I think people forget about all the things that come under DEI. And one of the things were that we would even go in as an organization and be able to talk to medical students at a lot of these colleges. We would be able to talk to them about Black women and Black folks' birthing experiences. We would be able to, a lot of times these folks are in medical school and they've never heard about who Dr. J. Marion Sims is and what he did. And we're no longer allowed to do a lot of those things in a lot of the campuses. So I think about in one instance where a medical student told me that Black women have more testosterone in their bodies than white women. And he believed that to be fact and thought that he heard that somewhere. And I always think about how if we didn't have the conversation, if the project was not there that day to talk to him, he may have continued on through that school and went to somebody's bedside thinking that Black women have more testosterone in their bodies and that we're stronger. And so it does bother me that folks don't think that the fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion includes us because it's not just about hiring. It's about a lot of the work we do. We don't, some people wouldn't even think about the fact that we go and talk to college students or that we go to agencies or that we go to hospital associations and talk to them about the experience of Black folks in the public health system. And in a lot of instances, we cannot do that anymore. We are not welcome to come, even if those agencies and entities and academic institutions want us there. They're afraid that if they bring us there, they will jeopardize their entire programs.
Thank you, Raina. Thank you. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that because it is a controversial conversation in Black community, whether DEI has ever been or is about us. So are the losses ours or not? So thank you for sharing the public health perspective on that. Thank you. All right, Sydney, Dr. Sydney.
Thing that has been on my mind since the change in our administration is, well, there has been talk about shutting down the Department of Education. And we launched a dashboard last fall that I am incredibly proud of that uses data that is produced by the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education that shows that since 2011, I believe it is, that Black girls have been overrepresented across all areas of school discipline sanctions. And if the Department of Education goes, this incredible resource goes with it. And we have tried to make this a resource that helps our partner organizations that are leading community organizing, grassroots organizing, and advocacy in the education justice space. We tried to design it in a way that they could look at it by state, look at it by district, look at it by special education, right? Like cut it in all of these different ways so that people can really tell the story of school discipline, exclusionary discipline, and its disproportionate impact on Black girls in ways that their electeds can hear and understand. Without that department, this resource goes away. We are unable to document the exclusionary discipline that we know Black girls are experiencing more than any other group. So I think about that a lot. I think about these conversations about critical race theory, which, it's like it's not critical race theory, but they think it's critical race theory. And it's actually just history, but, details. And so I think about this and I think about what it means for Black girls in schools. Our work, we know that Black girls want to be in spaces where they have Black educators, they have Black women counselors, teachers, that they see themselves in the lessons. They are able to imagine and where they can go, who they can be when they see examples of what other Black women have done. And the erasure of history from our schools is going to have a serious negative impact on Black girls. And I am sure over time we will see reductions in graduation rates and increases in all of the negative outcomes that we don't want for our young folks, because they are going to become even more disconnected from schools than they ever were before. Those are the things that are top of mind for me, and that really just like raise alarm bells. The other thing, like you, training, right? We have these resources for educators, but we're the National Black Women's Justice Institute. Will you bring us in? Are you going to be open to these types of conversations? I was on a work group. I am on a work group that is funded by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. A lot of the schools that have received their fund, or a lot of the schools that have received their funding, they wanted to talk about DEI. They wanted to talk about how do you support Black girls and other youth of color. Will they be able to do that? Will they stop caring about these issues now that we have an administration that is really dismantling the structures that have been in place to support and create equity and equality in our school?
Thank you. The DEI conversation is so complicated, complex and complicated. I wish that we were having national conversations, regional, even countywide conversations across the country, Black folk, because it's been simplified in the media and in the political agenda. And I think that's why some people are either in denial about what it really means, or think it doesn't matter what it means. And I just think that it's just worthy of conversation, because it is so complex. And I don't think that all of us have to believe or think the same thing. But I think everyone should know the same truth. I think everybody should have the same facts. That's what I want to say. Everybody should have the same facts. And in another life, I would try to start those conversations across the country, but I don't think I have time or energy to do that in this life. But I'm hoping that someone will rise up and say, hey, we need to talk about this, Black folk. We can be asleep and then wake up years later and wonder, how did we get here? And somebody's going to point us back to, you remember that day when you said you didn't care about what happened with DEI or whatever. So thank you. I'm glad that we brought DEI and the controversy of what we think about DEI to this conversation, because it is a very important part of our conversation, especially when we talk about how it can impact Black women's lives. So thank you. So we're at that point. So I'm going to come to the last question then for both Raina and Sydney, and ask you, if you could give us one word of wisdom in terms of what we should be doing as Black women in social justice work. Where should our focus be? What should we be attending to? What are the proactive strategies that we could be about in order to take care of ourselves and support the social justice work that we do? And I just want to say, in that moment, I know thousands of Black women in social justice work, and I don't know any that separate the social justice work that they do from who they are as a Black woman. So I really want us to, be mindful of, what does it take? What do we need to be focused on and be doing to support our work? But also, as Sakubu said, what do we need to be attending to and focusing on to take care of ourselves?
Thank you for saying that because I did kind of want to, I'm representing my org, so you can talk about like the work, right? But I do think it's really important to talk about the self. And I think one of the things that we stay away from when we talk about mental health, and we have our Sisters Mentally Mobilizing program where we train mental health advocates, we don't talk a lot about self-care. We need community care, especially in times like this. Self-care it may do it for a day. It is not going to do it for the marathon. So we really need to focus on community care. And part of the community care model is to collaborate. So, collaborating in our work. I'm so happy to have met Dr. Sydney and Dr. Sakubu. So collaborating in the work, but collaborating within community. We heard some sisters talk about bringing back bartering, right? Just really, supporting each other in this time. We may get to a point when all we have is each other. We're okay not connecting now because we have other outlets, but we're getting really close to the point where we will only have each other. And when we do,
Wait a minute, Raina. Raina, wait a minute, Raina. Wait a minute. When did we have more than each other? I just want to know.
well, I think
that could
I
be
think
another podcast, but
you're right. So I will say this implied sense of having other places to go. That people have gotten really comfortable over the last few decades. I just came back from Selma and Montgomery to commemorate the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. And it was very evident back then that Black folks knew that all they had was each other. I think we done fell off of that as we've tried to get our seats at the table and climb this class ladder. But yeah, so I really want to talk about the importance of community care, collaboration in all of our organizations, and collaboration as individuals and families and community.
I just want to second that. In this moment, I am leaning into more than self-care. I am leaning into self-love
yes,
because it's become so apparent to me that my longevity in this work depends on my well-being. And I don't think I understood that. I don't think I was thinking about it. I think I was just rolling through and pretending like I was taking care of myself when really I was just escaping from reality and only kind of partially engaging the people I love, with half of my brain in it and half of my brain elsewhere. And so in these last few months, I have started therapy. It has been a game changer. And I take baths, right? And this sounds so simple, but these baths that I take are everything to me. It is a moment where I get to disconnect. It is completely about me. I'm not worried about work. I'm not worried about my family. It is about what do I need to feel and be well in this moment. And I know and understand I need to do that so I can show up in all of the other spaces that are important to me and be able to be the best version of myself in those spaces. So I'm really leaning into self-love and finding community with other Black women who are doing this work, who are trying to figure out the same thing. I've got a new friend where we text each other. I'm like, girl, did you get your facial? Because that's what she wants to do to take care of herself. And she's like, are you taking your baths? Right? Like just the accountability that we are trying to create because we know that our well-being is what is necessary for us to continue this work. And, rest is resistance. And I am leaning into that so strongly in this moment and trying to also be a messenger to all of the other Black women in my life about how important this is for all of us, for our individual and collective strength, right? To power through this storm that we are all in this moment.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Sydney. We're in the same place in that there's nothing more important than learning to love ourselves. Because anything, you talk about imposter syndrome, when we think we're loving other people and we haven't loved ourselves, that's imposter syndrome. When you don't love yourself and you can't be true to you, that's what imposter syndrome means. It's not about you pretending out into the world. That's survival. Imposter is when you're not true to who you are, when you don't know who you are, when you don't love who you are. And so for me, the revolution for Black women has always been about moving away from trying to love others and loving ourselves, starting there, learning to love ourselves deeply, deeply, to look and I can't remember if that was Aleese or I don't remember who it was when she said, the song said something about when she looks in the mirror and she loves herself. And I was like, yes, girl, yes, 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 yes. We need to, as Black women, we need to be there to be able to look in the mirror. And I don't mean just the mirror that shows us our outside, because we may have had some work done to make the outside look good. And I'm not against that. I'm just too old for that. But a mirror that shows us internally who we are, and to be able to see ourselves in the complexity of who we are and the contradictions of who we are, and still love all of ourselves. The good, the different, the things that we do that we don't like, and the things that we do that we don't like. To be able to love ourselves wholly, I think, is the Black woman's revolution. To love ourselves as we have loved others. If we can get there, oh my gosh, that to me, that just is the revolution. So thank you for identifying self-love as the beginning. And I agree with you too, Raina, that there is no self-care without community care. Because we can't take care of ourselves alone. We can't be successful as a human being alone. And we definitely can't be successful as a Black woman alone. We need our Black community. We need our Black sisters and our Black brothers. We need our children, our aunties. We need all of that. And so thank you for identifying those, putting those two together for us today. Thank you, sisters. Thank you, Sydney and Raina and Dr. Sakuva, wherever you are, for being on the Black Women's Talking Back podcast. It was named in honor of Bell Hooks, who talked about Black women should always be talking back. And so this podcast is just the first of many opportunities. I intend to invite Black women in social justice from all around the world to talk back, to talk to each other, and to talk to those who don't like to listen. So thank you. Thank you, all of you who participated, who took out time today to be on this call. Thank you so much. And again, thank you, my sisters, our guest speakers. If you want to be on the podcast, if you want to share your story, your wisdom, your strategies for change, please email me at blackwomentalkingback@gmail.com. We're lining up panelists all the time. We're going to do some panelists, and we're going to do a lot of individual interviews. So there are a lot of sisters that have written books this last couple of years. I want to interview sisters who are writing their stories, who are telling their stories in book form, those who are doing new research and policy work, just our gamut, the full gamut. So if you're interested in being on the podcast, please email me and let me know. Once again, I love you all. I love you, every single one of you. I love you. Until the next time, don't forget to follow us.